In this demo, I'm going to show you how to use grid paper to start designing surface design or repeating patterns. And this is geared to people who have never done this before and maybe think, I don't know how to draw, but I love pattern design. How can I get started? Uh, um, the reason that we're doing it by hand is that, first of all, for beginners, it is important to do things by hand to sort of understand the mathematics and the technical aspects of how repeating patterns work. I'm a strong believer in that. I think that sketching should be done by hand before you move on to the computer, and maybe you don't know how to use a computer yet. We will definitely tackle that in the intermediate level, but in the beginner level, as a teacher, I like to start by doing everything by hand. And so what I have here is gridded paper. I've ordered gridded paper in a 10 by 10 grid. It comes in different size grids, but the reason I like the 10 by 10 personally is because when I go to full size, all of my patterns on the computer are going to be 10 inches by 10 inches. So if I'm working with, think of each of these 1-inch squares as a miniature version of a 10-inch pattern. So each one of the squares represents 1 inch. And once I design a pattern, I can blow that up. Or I can work on something like a 2-inch by 2-inch area, and I can enlarge that up to 10 inches by 10 inches later. Or I can also, it equals, mathematically, I can draw any kind of design, say a 1-inch design or a 2-inch design, and I can repeat that multiple times to fill up a 10-inch square. So I find 10-inch very useful. It's doing the math is much easier, and when I'm then taking my 10-inch designs up to larger sizes or smaller sizes, again, it's easier to do the math. So we're going to start with our 10-inch by 10-inch gridded paper, and I'm working on top of my mat board, my cutting mat, because I don't want any of my medium to bleed through onto my tabletop. So I'm using white artist tape to tape this down in place. And this is different than masking tape, because what happens is that you can remove it very easily and it won't rip your paper. Masking tape is too sticky, and so it's definitely worth investing in this artist tape. So I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't move all over the place. Now, the other reason to work by hand is that there is a big difference in the final effects. Here's an example of a gingham plaid that's been painted with gouache, and here is the exact same design done on the computer in Illustrator. And you can see, of course, this one's perfect and nice and tidy, and there are going to be times when you're going to want this look, but there are also times when you're going to want this look. There's a lot of charm and personality to the hand-painted art, and this is very much cherished and appreciated in the real marketplace as far as professionally designed patterns. As we go from beginner to intermediate level, we're also not only working on basic patterns, but we're working on collections of patterns. So let's say, for example, you had a hand-painted floral that's done with gouache, and you want a coordinating plaid or geometric or stripe to go with it. If you all of a sudden had this computer-generated accent print to go with the hand-painted art, they don't always match really well. So there's a lot of value in learning how to do these things by hand. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in Surface Design Basics. So the very first step is to come up with ideas. Now you can work with pencil. If I'm working with pencil for sketching, I like to use a 2B because it's soft and it's easy to sketch. And so I can just come in here and just start filling in some of my squares. I could do a checkerboard, and it doesn't have to be perfectly neat. I can just eyeball it But the grid is giving me something to work on. So let's just say I'm doing a basic checkerboard. So I could do something like this. Now, this is just a good way to get started. I can fill in this checkerboard. Now the pencil may, it may not be the most effective tool for this. I think I'm actually going to switch to a marker. So you might choose a, micron style. This one's a little thin for what I'm going to be doing today. I also like to work with Sharpies a lot, and these will definitely bleed through. So if you don't have a cutting mat, you're going to want to have some extra paper below. But so let's say, for example, I want to see what I can do maybe with an interesting, maybe take this geometric and do sort of growing, maybe squares that are going to grow in size. So I can fill those in, and maybe there's a small square and then another small square. So even though geometrics, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of geometric patterns out there, there's still room for you as a designer to maybe come up with your own spin on it. So we'll do one that's just all squares, different sizes. I'll make this one really big. I'm just going to stay within my 1-inch area. I'm going to switch to a thicker marker to fill that in. And let's see. I'm going to add a few more squares for visual interest and to kind of hold this all together. Okay, so there's an idea for a geometric pattern. Now I'm going to move on to just another idea. I'd like to fill this page up with a few different concepts, which is what you want to do. You don't want to just settle on your first concept. Let's see what else I can come up with. Okay, so I have a few sketches done, and you could see they're not perfect. They're just concept sketches, or what we call thumbnail sketches. And so I'm going to now take these to my photocopy machine, and I'm going to enlarge them and put them together into a larger pattern. If you don't have a photocopy machine with enlargement and reduction capabilities, the other thing that you can do is scan it in if you know how, if you have a scanner, and then you can print it out at different sizes. And you could also take, if you don't have a scanner, you could take a photograph of it, like a very close-up photo, and you can test it out with an app, collage making app. And I have a different video on my channel, YouTube channel, that shows how to use a free collage app with that. So I'm going to go hard copy this time. So just I'll be right back with you. Okay, so now I have some photocopies. I've enlarged these sketches up 200%, so that's double the size. And because they're small, I'm just gonna cut them out with my scissors, because again, these are just rough mock-ups, so that we can see how it comes out, see if we like the design before we invest too much time into it. So I'm just gonna cut these out. I just focused on these two for now. And I'm just eyeballing it. And remember, we worked on 1-inch squares, so these are gonna be approximately 2-inch squares. A little off because I'm just doing them by hand. I can discard the rest. I made a few copies. So it's fun. It's like being in elementary school again. Okay, so I have 4 copies of each. I'm going to start with that module. I'm going to take a new piece of my gridded paper to use as a background. And it's not essential for it to be taped down at this point. I'm now just using a glue stick, and I'm going to first figure out roughly where I'm going to put these so I don't, make sure to leave space. And I'm going to just try out a few patterns. Now I could keep these all going in the same direction. So imagine these are miniature versions of what your final design is going to be. So I could have drawn this whole thing out, but this is a time-saving way. And it also lets me find out if I have mistakes in my design. Because you could see here, if I meant this to be a checkerboard, it's actually off. I would have wanted to leave a row off because we have 2 coming together. And in the center, we actually have 4 solid squares together. But actually that might give it some visual interest. Now the other thing you notice is I could choose to have all my diagonal lines. This one had diagonal lines, and I actually just realized a mistake here. I need to fill this one in. That wasn't intentional. So let's fix that. So see, this is a sketching technique. So you can play with things and also correct your mistakes at the same time. Let's see, this one actually would go this way to match. And I'm just coloring on the photocopies now. Now notice this design, I did a checkerboard with diagonal lines, and right now they're all going in the same direction. But what occurred to me is I could maybe rotate these and have the diagonal lines going in the opposite direction. So these could go, I could flip this around. Oh, there also needs to be a solid square here. How did I miss that? It's probably the rushing through, trying to make this video. Okay, so I'm just doing it super, super quick and dirty, not quick and clean. Okay, so see now my diagonal lines are creating a diamond shape. So that's an interesting variation. So I could actually do it both ways and see which way I like it more. So let's go ahead and glue that one down. So I'm just going to flip it over close to the same space so I don't lose my place, and glue that down. Doing the same thing here, and you could see how just doing that little bit of Sharpie, how it bled through. So if you're using Sharpie, which I actually love working with Sharpies, but make sure you have a triple paper or cardboard or cutting mat covering your desktop so you don't end up with Sharpie markers all over the place. So I'm just carefully flipping it so I don't lose my place. Flipping it back the same direction. And I'm using the grid lines because my squares are now double the size of the original square, so it comes really in handy to use this as a background as well for just figuring out your designs. Okay, so there's one design. And if you have a roller or something, a burnisher of some kind, somewhere around here I have a roller, but I don't have it handy. So now I'm going to work on this one. Now the question is, do I want them going all in the same direction like they are? Or do I maybe also want to try rotating? Let's see what would happen. What would happen if we rotate? I just rotated that one 90 degrees. This one I could go 180 degrees. And this one would go, that would go like that, I guess. So that's kind of interesting. It's not symmetrical at all. It's quite asymmetrical. So you could see there's a lot of variations that you could make once you have this thumbnail. So I could have kept them all in same one direction, or I could rotate, or I could mirror image. Let's see what the mirror image looks like. So that would be, actually, I can't really mirror image because it's not symmetrical like this one. I think in this one I'll just go all in the same direction. That just seemed to look the best to me. So again, I'm gonna just go ahead and glue these down. And in a later step, I'll be showing you how to now make this into, how to eventually make this into finished artwork. But we're doing our sketches right now. And this is how you might have some happy accidents and variations from the same sketch. So again, you see it's not perfect, but it's giving me the idea of it. Now we're going to take this, after we finish our sketching process, we are going to take this to a more finished state. Now I want to try one more variation on this because I'm going to show you how it might have worked better as how it will look completely different as a checkerboard versus this mirror image diamond shape. Okay, I'm back, and this time I want to show you a variation of this particular design. And I should have colored in those squares before I made the copies, but I forgot to. So I'm going to cut them out. This time I'm not going to use the full design. I'm actually going to cut off one row in both directions because I want an even number of squares. Rather than the design of 5, I want a design of 4 increments, and you'll see why. And I left a little bit too much on there. Often when you're working with repeat patterns, you want an even number so that when you repeat it, it matches up nicely. Okay, so we're back to placement, and I do need to correct the piece that I missed. So actually, I think I'll go ahead and work on this one for now. See, I'll work on a new piece of paper because I don't really have enough space. Oh, let's just put it really close. I'd like you to see it side by side, so we'll do it this way. So I am going to keep them going all in the same direction. And you see, even when you're experienced, you make mistakes, so don't be hard on yourself. Okay, so the reason I want 4 for my master module is so that I get black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white. Notice in this one we had to, we have 2 black squares butting together, and in the middle we have 4 black squares butting together, and here we have 2 squares butting together. So it's giving us different increments beyond this size of black square. We're getting a rectangle basically when this is all seamed together, and then we're getting a larger square in the middle, and then we're getting this diagonal diamond shape with the lines. And actually that's really an interesting looking geometric. This one's a little more simple. I have to fix the places where I forgot to fill it in. Always better to fix that on the master, of course. But I'm rushing through, doing this as quickly as possible. And I'm fixing this. I cut them out at slightly different places, so that's where they're a little different. And then again, I'm just going to use my glue stick to put these in place. This one is wrong. See how there's 2 together? So I have to turn this. Oh, I might have cut it out in the wrong place. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is wrong. Oh no, this one's wrong. So see, you have to pay attention to the repeat. I had 2 white squares together, so it wasn't lining up. So here we go. Okay, so now you can see from one sketch I've gotten 2 completely different results. So you can play with that. Let's just see what happened with our other sketch. Now, with the one of the sketches, this one is a little bit different. This one is a different, yeah, this was this one right here. This one I enlarged it 400%, so it's already a 4-inch square. So in this one, I'm simply gonna just cut it out and use it without repeating it. And this becomes my master. So they don't have to all be tiny. It just depends on the level of detail that you're going for and what your final result will be. So this one, I don't have enough space on the paper, but I'm just going to go ahead and start a new piece. And I can use that space for another sketch. So actually the lesson learned here is to start up a little closer to the edge, just so you can maximize your art materials as far as gluing this together. So I'm going to just, I could even make some marks so that I know, okay, I'm only 2 from the edge, roughly. Let's find my pencil. I'm just going to go ahead and mark this so I don't mess it up. So glue stick. Okay. Okay, so this is just a few suggestions of how you can get started with geometric prints. Now, so far we only worked with squares and diagonal lines and triangles in these. Next, I'm going to show you how to work with circle templates if you want to do dots. And then from there, I will show you a later stage of how to refine these. So let's go back to the original paper that we had. So we don't want to waste anything. And I will tape it down so it doesn't move. And using my circle template, I'm going to come up with a polka dot design. And I'm going to make some little tick marks with my pencil so I know where I'm working. So let's say, for example, now this is a 1-inch grid, remember? So if I were to take my 1-inch circle template, it's going to line up exactly with the 1 inch. And that's going to be a little large to work with. So let's go down to the 1/2 inch. So there, the 1/2 inch is right here. So let's start with, I'm just going to go ahead and make a mark here and here. I'm going to mark a 2-inch square that I'm working from. And then I want to do another 2-inch square here because I want to show you the difference between doing a full drop and a 1/2 drop. Hopefully that'll be enough area. I think that'll work. Okay, so actually, I'll start here. So if I'm doing a full drop, I'm going to start on the top left of my square area. Actually, let me line this up, line it out a little bit more for you so you can really see it. Let me locate my ruler. Oh, here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and, with pencil, draw the final square. I think this will make it easier for people who have never done drafting before. Now, for people who are graphic designers or interior designers, this is going to be easy peasy and way beyond your, well below your knowledge level. So you can, if you already know how to do this, certainly skip this part. But, not everybody has had that experience. So this is how we used to do everything in graphic design before the computer. We had to, even if we were designing logos or designing lettering or anything. It had to all be drafted out. So if I want to create a 2-inch polka dot design, when this 2-inch square repeats this way and this way, this dot is going to be in this exact spot over here. So I'll draw it in just so you can visualize it. It would actually repeat there when this 2-inch square repeats to the right, and it would also appear right here when it repeats down below. So I need to keep that in mind as I design my polka dot pattern. So the big mistake I find with a lot of first-time designers is they'll put the other dot right here, but that's wrong because now these two dots are going to touch. We actually need it to be, we need a space here in order to create a good polka dot. So let me find my eraser. I'm just going to erase that just a tiny, tiny bit, just so it's not distracting. I like these white erasers. They're white artist erasers because they don't smudge the lead. You don't want to use the pencils that are like on the tip of the pencils we used back in grade school. So I actually want the second dot to hit at the center line. So imagine there's the 2 inches and this is the center line and the center line this way. So I want the 1/2 inch dot to hit here. And when to align your circle template, you're going to want the edge to be, the top edge to be right on the line where you want it to hit, and you want the side line, the edge of the circle to hit on the side line. So I suggest doing this all in pencil first before you do it. Now we're going to do the same thing going down. So for the vertical dot, we're going to hit it at the halfway mark, the center line and the left edge. And then we're going to also hit it at the center line and the center line. And this is why doing it by hand, then when you go to the computer later, you're going to understand the math a lot better. So now to fill this in, I can also, I'm confident that my polka dots are in the correct place. I can now use my marker to fill this in. And, you know, if you're, depending on what brand of marker you're using, be careful not to smear it. This one can smear, but I'm being very light-handed when I move my template. And so there's my full drop, and when we meet a full drop, it's a grid basically. So, and I'm going to fill it in. Okay, so that's filled in. Now when I want to erase my pencil lines, but I'm going to give myself a couple little what we would call registration marks so that I know where to line this up when I make multiples. So I'm going to actually just make these tiny little tick marks with my marker so that they don't, so I have a place to cut. My marker is drying up a little bit. There we go. Tick. Because I can always cut those off after I get it in place. But I want to be, because this part's going to be just completely invisible on the photocopy. So I need to give myself some little registration marks, is what we called them back in the old days, before computers, and we had to line things up manually on film and paper and so on. Now, once that dries, I'll give it a few minutes to dry before I actually erase the pencil lines. I'm going to now do a half drop polka dot, but rather than doing it here, I'm going to move over a little bit to give myself room, because with a half drop, the artwork will bleed out. So I'm going to use this 2-inch area. And I'm reserving area down here for future sketches. So let's go ahead and pencil in the full 2-inch square. And I'm doing it lightly because I know I want to erase this, but I would need it dark enough to see it. And notice I'm using a steel ruler. Steel is much more desirable than an aluminum or wood, of course. Wood is totally out. I mean, first of all, the steel will not cut. If you have an aluminum ruler, they're typically thicker, and also they will nick when you go to use your X-Acto knife with that ruler. So, I mean, this ruler I have literally had since I was in college. I mean, they're more expensive, but it'll last a lifetime if you don't lose it. So here's how we work with the half drop. Now with a half drop, I'm gonna just pencil it in so that you can visualize it first. So with a half drop, I can start with my circle, my half-inch circle in the same spot, but I want to alternate. Here's my center line. Let's see. I want to alternate like a checkerboard. So rather than putting the dot here at the halfway way, I'm going to actually drop down a 1/2 inch. I put this one here because this is to visualize how it's outside, what the next repeat would be, just like we did before. Then I'm going to, my next dot will be also at the same spot. So it's the same configuration here, but again, when it repeats, it's going to be out here. This dot will now be here. It's halfway down. So this is the center lines of the overall square, and then imagine this yet broken down into eighths or quarters. Okay, so this one now will repeat here, and this one will repeat down here. So again, this is a common mistake that I see with people, is that they try to put the other dot, they try to put the dot in the middle and another dot here, and then when it goes to repeat, you have 2 dots next to each other. So let's fill this in, and then we'll test it out. I didn't need to do that one. I'm actually going to cut that one off when I make the photocopies, and I'm not going to color it in. That was a mistake. I finished coloring them in. I'm going to give myself registration marks again. Now I'm going to make photocopies, and we'll put them together and see how they work out. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, and I'm going to start with just the full drop, and I'm just going to quickly again cut these out with my scissors. You can use an X-Acto knife if you prefer. Okay, so I have my 4 pieces cut out. And of course, for people that are more advanced, this is going to be too beginner for you, but some people have never done this before, figured out the measuring and figuring out the repeat pattern. So this is how we start. If you are more advanced, you can skip this step and go right to more complex designs. For example, if this is too basic, I want you to think about other kinds of dot patterns that you could do and repeat. Something along this line, you know, whatever you come up with. So here is a basic full drop. So you can see how I've matched up my lines, my registration lines, to show me, so that it defines the square. So each one of these is the original module, and it will repeat endlessly. Once we put this together and we make a perfect version of it in the intermediate level, we would be scanning this in and putting it into an endless repeat and applying it to patterns and changing colors and all of that. But this is how you get started. So actually I'm going to go a little closer to the edge, like I said I would. Actually, it's going to take up the center. I might as well center it on my paper. It doesn't really matter, as long as I leave myself space enough to get the whole thing on there. Let's go with that. So get my handy trusty glue stick, and I'm going to just flip this one over. And you don't even have to cover the whole thing. You could probably just do the edges to save materials, but make sure you don't lose your place. Let's see. And the registration marks can be whited out or you know, covered up later at a later point. So let's just get this down. Okay, so there's our polka dot pattern. Now this is still a sketch form, but the reason we do this is so we get the math all figured out before we then commit to a much more time-intensive process. So I will be showing that in a later phase. I'm going to now do the half drop to show the difference. I'm back now with my half drop, and I'm going to roughly put them in the same position as I did my full drop. So let's figure out where that would be. I'm going to try to get them in about the same spot just so I have a nice presentation. So about there and about here. I need to make sure I get them all going in the same direction. And that looks pretty good. So now glue stick. Okay, so there now you can see the difference between a half drop and a full drop polka dot. And this is as basic as you can be, but it's still, for somebody who's never done it before, figuring out the math on this is a really easy step-by-step way to figure that out and test your patterns out before you go too far with it. So next, in the next phase, I will be showing you how to transfer this design onto good paper. And at that time, you can decide what type of medium that you want to use to finish the design. In addition to our polka dots, let's just revisit our checkerboards and diamond shapes. These are also, we're going to transfer these onto good paper at a larger scale. And if these are too basic for you and you're more advanced, then I want you to challenge yourself and come up with some more unique, more complex geometric designs. Okay, I'm back and I'm using my light pad, which I bought on Amazon for under $25. And what I'm going to be doing now is taking our sketch and enlarging it up to 10 inches and creating the finished design very precisely. So this now, what I'm going to do is each of these squares, this little square is 1 inch and the negative space is also 1 inch, and then the large squares are 2 inches. If I were to enlarge this up to 10 inches. So if it helps, you can write down 2 and then 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches. And then going in the vertical direction, 2 inches. This is 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, and 1. So I'm going to work on 11 by 14 paper. I'm using a high quality brand bond. It's called Graphics paper. I like this a lot. It's 100% rag layout pad because it doesn't bleed when you're using markers. If you don't have that available, just any high quality bond is good, but you're gonna need the 11 by 14. Now that my light pad happens to be 11 by 14 as well, so I'm gonna have to tape this down actually onto my table surface so that nothing moves. I accidentally just turned it off. So that's not a good place to do it. And you could either go diagonally or vertically, whichever works for you. But the main thing is to get this tight so it's not going to shift around on you. Okay, so now we are, imagine this enlarged up to 10 inches. So the best way to do it is to create a 10-inch square and then a 1-inch grid within that 10-inch square. And then it's really easy to plot out where your design is. And I also I want to find the middle of my paper. So it's a 14-inch paper, so the middle is 7. And then working in both directions, I'm gonna go ahead and just do all my 1-inch marks while I'm at it, because it's just much more accurate if you do it that way. So I'm gonna go 5 inches to the left and 5 inches to the right. And using a nice sharp pencil with very thin lines is gonna help your accuracy. Now I could have started at the bottom. That actually is the way I normally work, start at the bottom. And I can just go ahead and memorize those dimensions to create my 10-inch square. Okay, so actually, if you just do the top and bottom only, that will be good enough. You kind of skip that first step. And now I'm going to use my ruler to connect those lines. And again, the more accurate you are, making sure that your tick marks are all lined up. I'm just going to do the 2 outer ones first so I can see where my horizontals are going to be. Okay, so now doing the same idea, I'm going to work slightly inside my line. I'm going to line it up with the top edge and find my center point. It's 11 by 14, so 11 would be at the 5.5. So I'm going to then mark at every 1/2-inch point until I go 5 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got to go all the way up here. So then go in the other direction, measuring down every inch until I have a 10-inch square. So I actually need this line to be longer. So that's why I wanted to determine that. And this one longer as well. And I'm even going beyond my light table a little bit, but that doesn't matter. Once we have our grid, then it's going to be like charting a map. So 5.5 is the middle point, and then every inch going up 5 inches and down 5 inches. Now I'm going to connect my lines, starting with the outside. And since I have my verticals in place, I can go ahead and do every inch now. And the lines can be very fine, light. You don't want to gouge into the paper because these are just your guidelines. They're going to get erased or covered up. So you want to just have a very light touch. And make sure that you're working with a nice sharp pencil. Now going the other direction, I'm going to draw in all my verticals. I missed the bottom line. Okay, so now we have our finished 1-inch grid. Now what we're going to do is plot out this design at the larger size. So if it helps you, you can just kind of fill in with pencil first where the solid areas are going so that you don't make any mistakes. So I'm just following along this top row here. One, two, three. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I missed a line. Let's see, there you go. Even the most experienced person can make a mistake. So I missed an entire row, and that's why my design was not lining up. I've got the tick mark here. Okay, so see, it was good to check myself because of, I missed a whole square. So I'm gonna fill in, I've just filled in this top row, and now I'm going to, for this diamond, I'm literally going to be connecting this point to this point. So this is where I don't need a triangle at this point. We'll use those on later projects, because this is an exact 45-degree angle, so I need to just join these 2 points. So that's here. And then I have another triangle here, so that's going to be these 2 points. Okay, so now I have, I'm just also, again, just graying in where I need to ink. So under the triangle, oops, I think that should be here. I think this is wrong. So it's actually, okay, so another large square, small square, another triangle, small square, small square, small square. These 2 squares hit together. Oops, I keep hitting my off switch. Then I have another large square here. Let's see, large square here, small square, small square, small square. Then I have another triangle here. I'll connect those in a second. Small square at the bottom, Oh, something's off here. Oh, the triangle should be here. See, again, easy to make mistakes. That means this one's wrong too. Triangle here. So small square, 2 small squares, large square, triangle, small square, small square. Okay, so bringing the ruler in again, connecting these. Connecting these. And then, so there's the triangle. I'll fill in solid here, solid here. So 1, 2, 3. So you can check it against your design to make sure you have everything in the right place before you start committing to the design. So yes, I missed one here. So I have a small square, double, small squares, 2 large squares. So then I also need another one here. Okay, so I've got those 2. Now I've got the big square, the triangle, the little square. This one I have lines going all the way down. Hopefully that makes sense to you, because it's the side of this big square, the side of the triangle, the side of the little square, the side of the big square, the triangle, and then the little square. So I have one line that goes all the way down. This next one has a skip in it. Next, I'm going to draw in all my horizontal lines. And again, I'm referring to my original mock-up. Now, if I make mistakes, I can cover those up with white. Once we get into the digital side of things, it's very easy to retouch that in Photoshop. So do the best that you can to avoid mistakes, but if you do, don't worry, there's fixes for everything. So following my diagram, I see I'm trying to fill in just where I need lines. I'm just going to carefully follow my measurements, and that way I have a very neat looking piece of art. I finished all my horizontals, and now I'm going to do the diagonals. So these, if your original pencil line work is very neat, then it will be easy to connect the corners. Now we could have also used our triangles, but it's actually not necessary. We just have 4 triangles in here. but in other videos I'll show how to use the triangles for layout purposes. Okay, so my layout is done and I have light pencil shading in. I can double check it against my sketch and make sure that I got everything. So I'm going to now stop here and look for I'm going to pull out my ink and my thicker markers and my brushes, and I will be right back. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the lines with a thicker Sharpie. And then I've brought out my paint palette and my water drawing ink, and I'm going to use a variety of brushes to fill that in. So I will be doing the entire thing. I'll do it slowly at first, and then I'm just going to fast forward through the rest. Now, since I'm going to be working over top of work that I've finished, I've taken a piece of tracing paper to protect my work, because otherwise my hand could smear it. So I'm going to use that to just shield the areas that have already been worked on. Okay, so those are roughly filled in. I still need to go back and make one more pass with my ruler. I didn't want to risk going over the lines. So I'm going to just do one more pass before I fill in the larger areas. And I'm using my tracing paper to shield the areas just so I don't get any smears. So I'm back to my fine Sharpie. And I'm just going to give it one more pass. Just inside the lines. So this step could have been done before I did the thick marker, but I just wanted to see how close I could get by hand since it's faster. We're almost finished now. We're going to fill it in. I'm going to give myself a little more drawing ink. Just be very careful. It's messy. And I'm going to use my tracing paper to, even though I'm relatively sure this is dry, I'm going to use my tracing paper anyway, just to protect all the areas that my hand might touch. And I'm just going to, as lightly as possible, fill this in. I don't want to have it overly saturated, because it'll start creating, it'll warp the paper, and it'll have pools of ink that will take a long time to dry and perhaps create warps and waves in the paper. So just go very light-handed. You can always go back and give it a second coat if necessary. This is pretty opaque though, so it's not like working with watercolor. You can pretty much cover it in one shot. So I'm just going to zoom through this. I got some ink on my paper, so I'm going to get a fresh piece, because I'm not sure where that came from. It probably picked up something that was still wet, but I don't want to smear it, so I'm just going to get another fresh piece of tracing paper. And I have one mistake here, which I'll fix at the end. There could be other mistakes too if I have smudges or drops or go outside the edges. so far it's looking pretty good. Okay, I finished filling it in and I'm gonna let this dry. And I did want to mention, if you do not have black drawing ink, you can use gouache. Once we, the next video that I make, I will be showing you how to do geometric patterns in color using gouache. And that's where we'll be using the ruling pen to do our straight lines, and then we'll be using a brush to fill it in. You will be working with custom colors, so certainly use black gouache as a substitute. But the drawing ink, you know, goes on really opaque in one step, and I'm just going to let this dry now. Now that everything's dry, I'm going to erase my lines, and I'm using my white artist eraser. It doesn't smudge very much, and it doesn't you know, leave marks, and it doesn't leave a lot of, it leaves a minimal amount of residue. You don't want to use the type of erasers that are yellow or orange or brown.